So it was home. It was something none of us had ever known. It was a home run by this funny, fattish little man, Joe Chino, who, by the way, everybody who imitates Joe, myself included, imitates his imitated Italian accent. But Joe, in fact, was a very cultivated speaker. You can hear him on a recording of Doric Wilson's play, and He Made a Her, introducing it. Joe was a very cultivated speaker, but often fell into this comic Italian clown patois, and as we all did, to talk to each other. And I stayed, and I was an expert typist. It's really funny. It was easy to get work in those days. All of us typed. All you had to do was be a good typist, and you could call a temporary type agency and say, "This is Robert O'Connor. I will work for you Tuesday morning and Thursday afternoon next week." And they said, "Oh, thank you," and sent you out. So you could earn a living easily. And I easily found permanent work just a few blocks from the Chino at Macmillan Publishers. Just a few blocks. And I'd finish work and run immediately to the Chino to shop or mop or whatever needed doing. And there were other people like me who just came. Nobody was paid. Maybe the waiters were paid, but I doubt it. I think they were just for tips. We just wanted to be there and help it happen. And you could not fall in love with Joe Chino. And the funny thing is, he never looked like, he was not a charmer. He was not a person who tried to make you fall in love with him. There was a sweet, distant sadness about him that made you want to comfort him. And he was the simple soul of generosity. I don't think anybody ever paid for a coffee or steamed eggs at the Chino who didn't have money. You know, it certainly wasn't run to make money. There was a big cardboard box under the coffee machine full of change. Joe couldn't be bothered with change. He paid everybody in bills. Any change that came in got thrown there. And it would there probably were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars of change in it at any given moment. And when things got tight, he'd go through and roll it up and pay the rent with rolls of quarters and nickels, or pay the electric bill, or pay the milkman, you know, out of that if he had to. But it certainly wasn't run from the money. Joe got the place. Joe was a dancer and got a little heavy and couldn't seem to shake it. And at the suggestion, we are told, of his best friend Charles Loubier, who may have been a lover. Charles was around the Chino. It was one of many of us who were just around the Chino. Sometimes acted if called upon to, Loubier. I have pictures of him. And Charles said he was the one that said to Joe, instead of just poetry and music like the other coffee houses, why don't you do plays? Well, Charles's boyfriend, Billy Mitchell, told me it was he who made that suggestion. Could have been either of them. Could have been, I don't know. But apparently... Billy Mitchell was a performer? Blonde guy. I have pictures of all these people. You'll see them, I think. Billy told me it was he who suggested it. And Billy sent me a program of what he said was the first. Dorothy Parker's Well, Here We Are. It's a short story about newlyweds, very uncomfortable newlyweds on a train, which they dramatized. And apparently from the start, they were doing poetry and music. There's a legend at the Chino that Bobby Dylan came in, and Joe kicked him out because he was doing old 30s wobbly tunes. He said, "Come back when you're doing your own music." Well, Dylan did his own music, but he didn't do it at the Chino. Just think, Chino could have been where Dylan was discovered.
And so Joe had been in business he started in 1959?
December 58.
58. So he'd been in business for about 2 years when you came on the scene, right?
Yeah. 2.5.
And who else was there, or who else had been doing work by the time you got there?
Nobody was doing plays in coffee houses. They were doing music and poetry, and there may have been some play readings. But the Chino was where you went to see plays for free. one acts, you know, and usually just tables shoved back and people acting in the middle of the floor. Even though there's all this talk about the stage made of milk crates. Indeed, we had a stage made of milk crates, and it could be located anywhere. And we had a lower stage, and then there was a higher stage that the waiters had to go over. You can see photos of that in a couple of places. In other words, there was any kind of stage anybody wanted if they were willing to build it. But the milk crates seemed to appeal to people. Like when we did my first play, The Haunted Host, we just shoved the tables back, put a couch and a desk in the middle. That was the set. I leaned on customers' tables during Billy's speeches. And I don't know what to tell you, they were still, I think, while I was away from college, while I was in Santa Fe and Albuquerque in the service in the insane asylum, Theater Arts did a picture of Mooney's Kid Don't Cry, a Tennessee Williams play at the Chino. But I wasn't near a library, so I didn't see the picture. And Time Magazine did a picture of Shirley Stoller in Tennessee Williams' Camino Real at the Chino. I have these pictures. But I didn't see either of those. And a lot of the people at Kennebunkport turned out to be Chinoites. And oddly enough, none of them ever mentioned it to me, though I was clearly the most stage-struck insect that had ever passed through. And later they all said, "Didn't we tell you about the Chino?" I said, "No, I don't, you know." They said, so they all thought, I guess they all thought somebody else would have told me. But I turned out to be perfect Chino meat.
So in the early days, you were typing to make a living.
Yeah.
And what were the other jobs you were doing at the Chino? Everything.
I'd come in, they'd say, "Here's Yellowbird, he'll go shop for pastry." Or, "Here's Yellowbird, he can go get milk." Or, "Yellowbird, can you mop up?" Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whatever. "Can you run lights? Can you hold book for rehearsal? Can you wait tables?" You know, some nights a waiter couldn't show up, and it was very hard waiting tables at the Chino. It would only pay one waiter. And if you were crowded and a show about to start, you had to be very fast and very efficient. It was a challenge, but once in a while I was even enlisted in waiting. The funniest waiter was a wonderful, handsome, great actor named Bill Hayslip, who one night came in and they said, Bill, Johnny's not here, can you wait tables?" He says, "Yeah, y'all put too much onus on this table waiting thing. It's just a job. Sure, give me an apron." Well, he learned how hard it was. He decided, the trouble is they don't keep records, because usually Johnny Dowd would just keep it all in his head and just, you know, zoom around. And he could zoom over the tall stage. And blah, 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 blah. So Bill started waiting, and it was a popular show. I don't remember what it was, but a lot of people were coming in, and he was having to wait tables here, and then somebody said over here, and somebody said here. He's running around and he's keeping detailed tabs on everybody, and he lays them all out on the counter by the coffee machine. He says, "Just fill these." And so Joe filled them, put the drinks out. Bill picked them up. The drinks had, of course, gone through the tickets, and they were all illegible. And Joe just stood there. Bill just piled drinks on the table and ran to the table and said, "I intuited from your astrological vibrations that you would like this drink." And he did that all around the place, giving people any drink and charging everybody the same price, hoping it came out to them. He said, and I remember at the end of the evening sitting there counting out his tips, and you know, he got away with it because it was so outrageous. And he turned and looked at Joe and Johnny and whoever else was buying and said, "You people are fucking crazy." But he had new respect for running the Chino. Is this what you want?
Yes, very much so. In the early, I see in the list of the plays that the Chino was doing, to begin with, Dorothy Parker and things, they were doing established plays and playwrights. When did the first playwrights start coming in?
Where's my glasses? Give me the list. It's called it was a play about the Cold War. La-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da-di-da. Well, then they got, and he made a her here. Oh, I'll have to call it in too.
That's all right, yeah.
Or it'll come to me in a moment.
Who was the writer?
Well, I'll remember in a moment. I'm 77, darling.
That's okay.
It comes and goes. The Flytrap. It was called Flytrap. I don't remember the author's name. He acted in it. So did Charles Louvier and Joe Davies. You know. And it was a satire about the Cold War in which Russia and America are competing to see who can compile the biggest stockpile of insecticide. And among the wonderful photos of it that somebody sent me is one of the author giving what is probably the American stage's first finger to somebody. But that was the first original. And it was with that, it's important to remember it was illegal to do plays.
Why?
There was no license for it. There was no permit to let you do plays. And after a couple of visits from the cops, the dishwasher, Kenny Burgess, who was an artist, started making the posters for the windows. And he made them so that they looked like abstract art. And the cops passing by would think it was an art gallery and this was an abstract painting. But the cognoscenti knew to tilt their heads and read. And you know, you can see it said "The Flytrap" by so-and-so, it's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or whatever, you know. All the information was on there, but Kenny did it in a Kandinsky and abstract style. The Lincoln Center Library has a lot of those posters. They were very ingenious. Kenny was a dear person. When we did Snow White, Kenny played all the little forest animals. He put on long johns and fur and a spaniel cap and safety pin photos of little animals all over him, and he was all the forest animals, the ones that wake up Snow White. Where were we?
So that was the first play.
That was the first one.
Flytrap. And then when did the other playwrights start coming in?
Well, it says here that Doric, the first Doric play it has here is March 23rd, 1961.
Uh-huh.
And he made a her. That was a play about the, oh, here it is, Fly Spray. It says 1960, it was 1961. And he made a her is an Adam and Eve play with psychiatric language, very witty. Everyone was in love with Doric. Doric was our Noel Coward, our William Faulkner, not Faulkner, name a sophisticated Broadway, Somerset Maugham.
Right.
He dressed like that. He was insufferably handsome and disdainful of everyone, so far as I know. I never heard of anyone at the Chino who actually had an affair with him. I was at his feet, as you may imagine. Thank God for Dennis Corbett. Doric always said that he thought I was just Yellowbird, that he never saw a play of mine until many years later he produced one at his gay theater, Tosos. And he says he wished he'd known that I had a brain, because I must have looked like a fool following him around, you know, awestruck. But everybody was in love with Doric. And he did, when I got there, he was just doing his last play, Pretty People, a wonderful play about people so pretty that there's no place for them in life and they go into a museum. And it ended with one girl stepping up on a pedestal and blocking the road behind her and posing, Patty Dillon. And it was just heartbreaking. He was an awfully good one-act playwright. And then he and Joe had a fight. Joe wanted to charge a minimum. Joe decided it was time to charge a minimum, and Doric was against any sort of charge for the plays and stalked out. But he was probably looking for something to be haughty about anyway. But Doric lived next, Doric then kind of dropped out of theater for several years, but Doric lived next door to the Stonewall and walked out of his house one day into the Stonewall riots and got radically politicized and changed overnight from Noel Coward to Abby Hoffman and started running up here in the street saying, "Greetings, gay brother." You know, it's practically embarrassing. And he opened the first openly gay theater, Tosos, The Other Side of Silence. and became a major producer. He not only produced new gay plays, but he grabbed all of our old gay plays from the Chino and La Mama and places and gave them big public showings. We all wanted to call Doric the first gay playwright because in all of his Chino plays there was a character that was clearly gay, though there was no gay interaction. But Doric said, no, I didn't have the courage. Lanford and you and Billy Hoffman and Hal Borsky and Bob Heide were the ones who had the courage. I was not the first gay playwright. I could have been. But years later, when he did some of the Chino plays at Tosos, he made the characters openly gay, especially in And Now She Dances, which is his Salome and John the Baptist play. And it's a tremendous play. It really ought to be done all the time. He finally made the characters openly gay. But since he refused the title of first gay playwright, Lanford got it. You know, I mean, it was Lanford who produced Madness of Lady Bright.
And Madness of Lady Bright was done several times at the Chino, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that
Oh.
Lanford came in with it?
Oh, sure. Well, see, Lanford wasn't a playwright. Lanford was a graphic designer. He had been trained as a graphic designer. He and Michael were, I don't know if Lanford and Michael were lovers at that point or not, but they were inseparable.
Michael
Warren Powell. You can ask Michael. Michael's still alive, I understand. He had a stroke, but I understand he's much better. And I'm sure he'd love to talk about all this. Set things straight, you know. He's an Aquarius. And they came to New York. I don't know exactly why. And they got involved with Glenn DuBose and Jim Arntz, who were two guys from the Chino that I knew from Kennebunkport, who introduced them around and brought them to the Chino. And Lanford saw Richard Smithy's production of an Ionesco play. I don't remember if it's The Chairs or The Lesson, but one of them. And it made him want to be a playwright. Just out of the blue. He says he never had any idea of it, but Ionesco really thrilled him. And Billy Mitchell thought Lanford had, you know, from his table talk, thought Lanford had a gift for Gab and asked him to write some skits. And it turns out those were the first dramatic writing that Lanford did. And Billy dug them up for me a couple of years ago before he died and sent them to me. And I published one of them in my Chino pages.
And they were just skits by Lanford.
Yeah, Billy was planning on doing a review at the Chino, and asked Lanford, and indeed they were witty skits. And in fact, the skit I published was actually done years later at La Mama in a benefit called Bang. And I got Lanford's permission and posted it in my Chino pages. There's several plays that were otherwise unpublished that are in my Chino pages. You might enjoy to read it. They're short. So where were we? Oh, so Lanford came to town, and like everybody, wound up living with me for a while. Lanford and Michael Warren Powell and I were considered inseparable.
And where were you living?
On 2nd Avenue, near 23rd Street.
And just tell us a little bit about 2nd Avenue at that time. I mean,
Oh, it was just businesses, you know, it wasn't downtown, it wasn't a bohemian district at all. But apartments were easy to get. Our apartment was $140 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment. And with 3 of us working, it was nothing. Although, as it turned out, I'm really skipping around in time a lot.
no problem, it's fine.
You have my permission to chop it up. I took regular office jobs, and Lanford and Michael were also expert typists, and that's all you needed to get work. But they took jobs also as hotel clerks, because you could work day or night, which for some reason they valued. So I would go off during the day to work at my office jobs, and Lanford would use our kitchen table to write Madness of Lady Bride. And then I would come home, and he would go off supposedly to his hotel clerk job, and I would write Haunted Host. And as it happened, he got Lady Bride on first, so I'm willing for Lanford to be the first gay playwright. I don't need it. And then the idea was I would work for a month, so Lanford could do plays, Lanford and Michael could do plays. Michael would work for a month, so Lanford and I could do plays, and Lanford worked for a month, or whatever, you know. It only took one of us working to pay rent and groceries.
Yeah.
Well, I came home one night to find an eviction notice on the door. Turned out Lanford and Michael hadn't been working or paying their rent. And I said, what then have you been doing? They said, well, Michael said, well, Lanford's planning a big play, and he's been going, sitting in parks and talking to people. And it's really important. And Lance would come home with his pockets full of matchbooks and business cards and just scraps of paper with things he'd heard people say on the streets and subway, and he'd put them in a shoebox. And after he got enough of them, he'd take them out and sort them out and slowly construct a character out of these 10 quotes and another one out of these 15. And that became Balm in Gilead and Rhymers of Eldridge. And it was magical watching him do it. If I ever met, I guess the first genius I ever met was Johnny Dodd. What Johnny did with a few Christmas tree lights at the Chino was unbelievable, and it still influences lighting around the world to this day through Tom Horgan. And the next one was Lanford. Just watching his gift for characterization, creating atmosphere, and he and I shared one belief that I think we bullied some other people into using. All plays are musicals. Shakespeare and Gene Kerr taught us all plays are really musicals. Write them like musicals, direct them like musicals, act them like musicals. And Marshall Mason and Tom O'Horgan understood that and directed, they directed our plays the right way. You know, there's no method acting at the Chino and La Mama. You got out there, you took a breath, and you said the words, and you bounced them off the rhythm of the next speech. And we created these things which some people say climaxed in my play, Kennedy's Children. The musical concept of a play, but it's really Shakespeare and Sophocles and Gene Kerr, you know. And Neil Simon, he knew what he was doing too. Noel Coward. These people knew that all plays are musicals. And in spite of great actors like Shirley Knight and Carol Nelson and Heath Ledger, you still will go right if you remember, take a breath and let the words take you. Where'd they go? Where was I? Oh, so I came home and they said that Lanford had been using this time they were supposed to be working and earning rent, bumming on the streets, and Lanford getting the material for these two great plays. And I couldn't be angry, you know. So I had to move in with someone and all this, but
You got thrown out of the apartment.
well, yeah, couldn't come up with 2 months' rent, you know. And years later, the last time I saw Lanford in the 80s or 90s, when we were all of us who had done gay plays at the Chino were brought to New York to be on a program called In the Live, and that's on the page of links I sent you. And they interviewed us all about the Chino and gay theater, et cetera, et cetera. And then they took us down to the Poe, which used to be the Chino, for lunch. And Lanford and I were waiting for the limo. And I turned to him and said as sincerely as I knew how, I always wondered what it was I had that let me be among you beautiful people. And Lanford, with perfect Lanford Wilson timing, tilted his head and said, you had a job, Bob. And it was true. I was the financial backbone for a lot of people. I was raised to support myself, you know, and they weren't. So I don't ask questions.
Well, going back to the Madison Lady Bright and those
first
early plays of
the first production of Madison Lady Bright was done by a director who was a little too affected, but the genius of the play and of the leading man, Neil Flanagan, came through nonetheless. And the next, it was instantly slated for revival with another director. I don't remember whom. Maybe Glenda Bose. I don't know. It may be extant. And it was simpler, and it was just Neil and the boy and the girl who act out his memories and fantasies. And it was stunning and instantly scheduled for yet another revival. And you can see productions of a play by Larry Lunin with him and Yvonne Rainer, where everything has just been shoved aside because they had the date. and they're doing their play, but everything's ready to be hooked back up for Lady Bride. It was a monument of off Broadway. It just showed. I mean, Doric had been good. Don't get me wrong. Doric and a Fly Spray and another man whose name being there who did 5 plays, but he did one more play than Doric did, and then had to quit because he was working for the city department that was trying to close the Chino.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's in my Chino pages.
Yeah.
He was, I can't remember his name right off. It's Italian, and he did 5 plays at the Chino, and then had to quit because he was being asked to close the Chino, and there was something of a conflict of interest. I talked with him and got a play of his to publish in my Chino pages shortly before he died. Mannequin. He wrote a play called Mannequin. That was his last play at the Chino. But
now you were doing a lot of Tennessee Williams in here.
oh,
too.
I think Tennessee Williams is the most produced playwright at the Chino.
At the Chino.
Probably even more than Lanford.
Because he had the short plays already. He
And
wasn't.
because we worshipped him.
Yeah.
You know, he was our generation's playwright. When we talk about great playwrights, sometimes we wouldn't mention him because he was taken for granted. You know, that was ground zero, was Tennessee Williams. God, I wish he'd known about the Chino. Yeah, that would have been something.
Did Tennessee Williams ever show up there?
Not that I know of.
Never.
I'm sure if he and Joe Chino had met, the universe would have inverted. But yes, they did his plays over and over. But in spite of Doric's marvelous productions, the Madness of Lady Bride kind of took everything to another level. Not only because of the writing and the eventual great direction, but because of Neil's performance. It brought Neil out. He had done a lot of shows there as director and actor, but this was something else. And it challenged everyone to write better. You know, I'm sure Tom Ian, who later wrote Dreamgirls, was
Why
challenged.
Hannah Skirt?
Yeah, the next mega production at the Chino was Why Hannah's Skirt Won't Stay Down. Again, not only because of the terrific script, but the fantastic performance it brought out of a woman named Helen Hant. Bette Midler admits she saw every performance she could of it, and got her divine Miss M character from Helen. There is a photo somewhere of Bette Midler in the Chino. I can't find it again. With her hair still mostly brown, sitting waiting to see Helen. You know, and also in Why Hannah's Skirt Won't Sit Down was the most beautiful man who ever hit New York, Steve Davis. He was from Florida, middle class or rich boy, unspeakably beautiful. We called him the Oscar. He looked like the Oscar. And you have to understand, even at the Chino, being gay was somewhat underground. But there were what were called muscle magazines then. No genitalia, but magazines that were nothing but pictures of good-looking guys in the briefest bikinis possible. Well, there was a guy named Jim Stryker, who was the outstanding blonde model in those. And one day I took him, he was wearing a white bikini. I drew a red, white, and blue, I drew stars and stripes on his bikini, and I thumbtacked that picture to the Chino wall. First time anybody had dared tack a picture of a naked man or near naked man to the Chino wall. People were saying, Bob, can you do that? I said, oh, every one of us has that picture at home. And just then, Steve Davis crewed up on a friend's yacht to Manhattan and went wandering around in Greenwich Village and wandered into the Cafe Chino. And I will never get out of my memory the picture of Tom Ian buying Steve Davis coffee and cake and sitting just staring at him with the picture of Jim Stryker right there. And just weeks later, Steve up on stage in a stars and striped bikini in Why Hannah's Skirt Won't Stay Down. So I take a little responsibility for that unforgettable image. There's not a good photo of Steve in that show, just in the background. But those were the two first mega productions. I mean, not in physical size, but in effect. they challenged everybody to write better. And I'd like to think the Haunted Host did too. People were very kind.
The Haunted Host was 64, November 64.
Yeah.
And you had been through a lot of plays. I mean, you had seen a lot of plays by then.
Here's how that happened. One day, after work at Macmillan, I helped Lanford and the director, Glenn DeBose, move a folding bed into the Chino for Lanford's first play, So Long at the Fair. That's the one where Michael Warren Powell, as the shy boy, couldn't be gay, as the shy boy, murdered the sexually aggressive girl and folded her up in a sofa bed. It can be done. And it was a real coup de théâtre, you know, I mean, people were just gasping as he actually folded a woman up in a sofa bed. And the curtain call was great, of course, because Michael came out and bowed and looked around, said, "Oh yes," took the cushions off and unfolded, and she stood up on the bed and took her bow. It was stunning. Well, we were moving that sofa in, and it was on a raised stage. So as Lanford and I and Michael Warren Powell were leaving the Chino to go have lunch, I turned around, and Glenn DeBose and the stage manager, who I think was Dennis Parrish, I don't remember, were carefully making sure, you know, they were unfolding the sofa bed and folding it back up, and unfolding and folding it back up to make sure it worked. And they were in silhouette from a stage light. And I watched them, and they unfolded it, talked over it, and folded it back up. And Lanford and Michael were pulling that, and I said, "Wait a minute." I suddenly knew who these two silhouettes were. I knew why they unfolded the sofa bed, and I knew why they folded it back up. And we went around the corner to a diner named Joe's, and I took a napkin and asked somebody for a pen and started writing The Haunted Host. It wasn't an idea, I guess it was, but I knew who those people were, and all I had to do was write down what they were saying in my mind. And that's, you know, it's when Lanford and I began splitting the table. He was writing Lady Bride, I was writing Haunted Host, and it was the first play I ever wrote. I never dreamed of writing a play. I'd written poetry galore. But I took it in one day, and Joe was there, and Lanford and Tom Ian and David Starkweather, another major Chino playwright, happened to be there. And I took the play and I said, "Joe, I wrote a play. Why don't you do it?" Joe took it and threw it over his shoulder into the garbage can. Said, "You don't want to be a playwright, Bob. Playwrights are terrible people. They're vain and they're demanding. And you're a good guy. You know, you'll thank me." And I said, "Oh, all right." And Lanford stepped forward and pulled the play out of the garbage and says, "Joe, Bob's a good guy. He pulls his weight around here. You ought to do his play." Joe said, No, he'll thank me someday." Lanford said, "If you don't do Bob's little play, Tom and David and I won't do any more plays here." And Joe looked and said, "A palace rebellion?" And Tom, Ian, and David looked at Lanford like he had just made a vow on their behalf. And he turned and said, "I live with him, it's good." And they said, "Oh, all right." So Joe said, "Oh, okay, but you'll be sorry." And they did it, and